She gets whipped to death for a murder she didn't commit, then wakes up in a stranger's body with 1 year left to live, only to find out her daughter is now in the hands of the very man who had her killed. Before everything went wrong, Isabel was just a servant barely surviving inside Count Grey's mansion. The other maids treated our girl like she crawled out of a sewer. Apparently being born poor is enough reason for nobles to act like absolute demons. They constantly mocked her for being from the slums, saying no matter how much she washed herself, she'd always be dirty. But Isabel stopped reacting to the bullying a long time ago. At this point, surviving was the only thing that mattered. So while everyone else slept, she worked herself to the bone just to avoid becoming the next scapegoat. And somehow, all that suffering eventually paid off. Her relentless work ethic catches the attention of Countess Diana Grey, turning Isabel into her personal maid. But honestly, the promotion changes nothing. Life is still empty, still miserable, still painfully lonely. Until one day, she gives birth to a daughter named Margarita. And just like that, her entire world changes. For the first time in her life, Isabel finally has someone worth living for. From that moment on, everything becomes about protecting Rita. She keeps her head down even lower than before, avoiding conflict and doing everything possible to survive quietly beside her daughter. But this world was never going to let someone like her live peacefully. One day, Isabel is suddenly accused of murdering Countess Grey. And before she can even process what's happening, the servants drag her through the streets like an animal. No one listens to her explanation. No one cares about the truth. To them, she's already guilty. As the crowd screams for her execution, Isabel desperately cries out that she's innocent. But the only answer she gets is the crack of a whip. Every lash tears another scream out of her body. And in her final moments, there's only one thing on her mind.
No, Rita!
Then everything goes dark. But when Isabel opens her eyes again, she's no longer in the execution square. Instead, she wakes up in a soft bed, completely confused about how she's still alive. Even stranger, her body feels wrong. The pain from the whip is gone, but now her legs are throbbing instead. Confused, Isabel rushes to a mirror and instantly freezes. Because the face staring back at her isn't hers. Before she can even process the shock, footsteps suddenly approach the room. A man wearing glasses walks in and calmly tells her she's finally awake, but the second he gets close, Isabel's body reacts on pure instinct. She immediately grabs the man and slams him against the wall hard enough to nearly choke him out. Realizing what she just did, Isabel quickly lets him go while the poor guy collapses to the floor coughing for air. The man then introduces himself as a physician. According to him, he found her unconscious in an alleyway and brought her home for treatment. But that explanation only raises even more questions. Who is this woman? Why was she shot? And why does Isabel suddenly have her body? The physician explains that the bullet wound itself isn't fatal, but then he reveals the real nightmare. A deadly poison is spreading through her body, and there's no known cure. Which means this new body only has 1 year left to live. Our girl literally escaped one death sentence just to walk straight into another one. At first, Isabel thinks she's losing her mind. After all, waking up in someone else's body sounds completely insane. But the pain feels too real to deny. The original Isabel is dead, and this stranger's body is now the only life she has left. Even so, there's only one thing Isabel truly cares about now. Finding her daughter. Because somewhere out there, Rita is still alone in the same cruel world that already destroyed her mother once. And this time, Isabel refuses to leave her behind again. Whether Rita recognizes her anymore doesn't matter. Even if she can't be her mother again, Isabel still wants to protect her somehow. But then she asks the physician what year it is, and instantly realizes something is horribly wrong. At first, she assumes it's still the year 800. But the physician calmly tells her it's actually February of 810. Over 10 years have passed since Isabel's death. The news hits her like a truck. Because when she died, Rita was only 10 years old, which means her daughter should be 20 now. And suddenly, a terrifying question starts tearing through her mind. Is Rita even still alive? Desperate for answers, Isabel immediately grabs a nearby newspaper despite barely being able to stand. And the moment she sees the name Margarita printed on the page, her entire world freezes. The physician notices her reaction and casually asks if she means Countess Margarita Gray. Yeah, that one sentence completely shatters Isabel. Because somehow her daughter became the Countess of the Gray family. The same family that destroyed both of their lives. The newspaper then starts exposing Rita's so-called scandals, mocking her for drinking, wasting money, and being the daughter of a slave. And honestly, the more Isabel reads, the worse everything starts to feel. Because there's only one way Rita could have become Countess Gray. By marrying Jeremy Gray. The husband of the woman Isabel was accused of murdering. And trust me, Jeremy Gray is absolute trash. Even while married, the guy constantly chased after other women like vows meant absolutely nothing to him. But because divorce in the Empire is basically impossible, there was only one real way for him to escape his marriage. His wife had to die, which suddenly makes Isabel's execution look a whole lot less random. At that moment, Isabel realizes something terrifying. There's no way Rita married that man without knowing the truth. And that thought drags her back to the day everything fell apart. Back then, Isabel and Rita were peacefully eating together when someone suddenly started banging on their door. The second Isabel heard the voices outside, she immediately realized something was wrong. But instead of panicking, she forces a smile and looks toward Rita.
Rita, do you want to play hide and seek?
Confused, the little girl asks why so suddenly, but Isabel gently tells her to hide somewhere safe until her mother comes to find her. And thankfully, Rita listens. The moment her daughter disappears from sight, Isabel starts counting out loud while the pounding on the door gets louder and louder. Before she can even finish counting to 10, the door bursts open. Men immediately flood into the room and accuse Isabel of murdering Countess Gray. She desperately demands proof. But nobody cares. The decision was already made before they even arrived. The guards drag Isabel through the streets while Rita secretly watches her mother disappear. And from that moment on, they never see each other again. Back at the execution square, Isabel realizes the entire trial was a joke from the start. No evidence. No witnesses. Nothing. Jeremy Gray simply pointed at her, and everyone obeyed. Even while being whipped nearly to death, the executioners keep telling her to stop resisting and just die already. But Isabel refuses to let things end quietly. In one final desperate gamble, she suddenly screams that she was promised money for the murder. Not because it's true, but because she wants to plant even the smallest seed of doubt into the crowd. Because if everyone believes she was truly a murderer, Rita would spend the rest of her life carrying that shame. And even while dying, Isabel's final thoughts are still about protecting her daughter. Back in the present, regret starts eating away at her. She wishes she had fed Rita better. Then another horrifying realization hits. If Rita married Jeremy Gray, there's a chance she's living beside the man who ruined both of their lives just to get revenge. That thought alone is enough to make Isabel move. She thanks the physician for saving her life, and the man admits she reminded him of his younger sister, so he couldn't leave her to die. But while preparing to leave, Isabel suddenly notices something important. The Gray family is currently hiring a maid. And immediately, she realizes this is her chance to get close to Rita again. The physician warns her not to overwork herself and hands her painkillers before she leaves for the capital. But the second Isabel arrives at the station, she notices something feels off. Officers are everywhere. Apparently, someone recently broke into Duke Mirabel's mansion and stole confidential documents. Now the guards are searching every traveler that matches the suspect's description. And unfortunately for Isabel, the suspect apparently has the same hair color and height as her current body. Yeah, our girl really cannot catch a break. Trying not to panic, Isabel quietly keeps moving while officers stop nearby passengers for questioning. Then she quickly realizes something important. The trains for the south and the capital leave from opposite sides of the station. And suddenly, a risky plan forms in her mind. If she can lure the guards toward the southbound train, she might still be able to sneak onto the train heading for the capital. So the moment the officers get distracted, Isabel walks straight toward the southbound ticket booth and loudly demands a ticket right before departure. Then, while making a scene, she deliberately reveals her red hair. The officer instantly notices her, exactly like she wanted. And while the guards rush toward the southbound platform, Isabel prepares to disappear in the opposite direction. Isabel's plan actually works. The moment she loudly asks for a southbound ticket and reveals her red hair, the officers instantly take the bait. Suddenly, guards start rushing across the station, shouting for everyone to stop her.
Stop! Stop her!
But there's one major problem. Her body is still heavily injured. Every step sends pain shooting through her legs as Isabel forces herself to keep running, despite her gunshot wound barely healing. And honestly, the officers are way faster than she expected. The second they start gaining on her, Isabel's body reacts on pure instinct and pushes itself even harder. It's almost like this body was trained for situations exactly like this. Even so, she nearly collapses multiple times trying to escape through the crowded station. Because no matter what happens, she absolutely cannot get caught here, not before reaching Rita. Luckily, the chaos eventually works in her favor. The officers lose sight of her in the crowd just long enough for Isabel to rush toward the capital-bound platform. But right as she reaches it, another guard spots her and starts shouting. Thankfully, the train doors close before the officers can reach her, and just like that, Isabel finally escapes the station. As the train starts moving, the relief hits her all at once. For the first time since waking up in this strange body, she finally has a moment to breathe. During that quiet moment, Isabel starts thinking about everything that's happened so far. Somehow, the timing of those two trains leaving in opposite directions worked out perfectly, a stroke of pure luck. She silently thanks the original owner of this body as well, because whatever kind of life this woman lived before, the combat instincts hidden inside her body just saved Isabel's life. But once the adrenaline fades, reality starts crashing back down again. 10 years have passed since her death. Rita is already an adult now, and the world Isabel returned to is completely different from the one she left behind. By the time she arrives in the capital, Isabel rents a small room at an inn and finally checks the luggage she carried from the station. Immediately, things get even more suspicious. Inside the bag are multiple fake identity cards and a loaded gun. Yeah, our girl might have reincarnated into the body of an actual spy. Among the fake identities, one name catches her attention, Bella Le. It is close enough to her real name that she can remember it naturally, so Isabel decides to use that identity while applying to the Gray estate. But the gun itself feels wrong. The moment she touches it, a strange sense of dread washes over her body, almost like this body remembers something horrible connected to it. Without understanding why, Isabel immediately puts the weapon back down. At this point, the exhaustion finally starts catching up to her. In less than 2 days, Isabel has died, reincarnated, learned 10 years past, discovered her daughter married Jeremy Gray, escaped armed officers, and inherited the body of a possible criminal. Yeah, anyone would be mentally collapsing right now. For a brief moment, Isabel wonders if she's even allowed to rest anymore. But the second she falls asleep, she hears a familiar voice calling out to her.
Mother?
The voice sounds distant at first, then louder.
Mother!
Isabel suddenly wakes up in shock, and immediately, the image of Rita trapped inside that mansion fills her mind again. Her daughter is still living beside the man who destroyed both of their lives, completely alone. That thought alone crushes whatever exhaustion Isabel was feeling. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the capital, 2 nobles receive troubling news from an informant. Apparently, the spy they were tracking has suddenly disappeared with no body, no capture confirmation, nothing. The man receiving the report is Count Ian Lepellis, while his companion is Viscount Cern Victor. Unlike the calm and composed Ian, Cern immediately realizes how dangerous this situation could become, because if the informant escaped, then they're still somewhere inside the capital. But before the conversation can continue, armed men suddenly appear from the darkness and ambush them. Cern quickly counts 6 attackers, but Ian barely even reacts. Instead, he calmly tells Cern to split up while he handles the enemies himself. And honestly, this man is an absolute monster. The second the fight starts, Ian immediately overwhelms the attackers with terrifying efficiency. Before Cern can even fully escape, several men are already down. The remaining attackers quickly realize they completely picked the wrong target. One survivor eventually gets pinned down and interrogated by Ian, who asks a single question: where is Eileen Nova? The moment that name gets mentioned, the terrified attacker immediately remembers the spy's description: red hair and green eyes. Which means Isabel is still somewhere inside the capital, and now people far more dangerous than random station guards have started looking for her. After the fight in the alley, Ian immediately realizes something important. Eileen Nova was never captured, and more importantly, she was never confirmed dead either. That alone is enough to keep bothering him, because despite everything surrounding this mysterious spy, there's still one thing Ian desperately hopes is true: that she didn't betray them willingly. Meanwhile, poor Cern is over here apologizing after struggling against only 2 attackers during the ambush, and honestly, Ian does not let that slide. The man basically tells Cern he needs way more training the second they get back, cold as always. But the fight itself was honestly a mess from the start. The attackers had completely surrounded them and demanded both men surrender peacefully, and one of them even threatens to shoot if Ian doesn't lower his weapon. The moment the enemies bring up the Victor family and start threatening Cern directly, gunfire immediately breaks out. And even after taking a bullet to the arm, Ian barely reacts because right now, he's far more focused on figuring out where Eileen Nova disappeared to. After thinking through the situation, Ian quickly reaches a conclusion. Someone as skilled as Eileen definitely wouldn't rely on only one escape plan. If her original route became compromised, then she probably prepared a backup location beforehand. And just like that, Ian decides their next destination, the capital. Meanwhile, inside the capital itself, Margarita Gray is attending another high society gathering filled with nobles desperately trying to climb social ladders. One woman named Madame Vitt proudly claims she personally convinced the famous author Khan to attend her salon, but before the woman can keep bragging, someone casually mentions that Khan recently found a new muse. Yeah, the entire room instantly realizes Madame Vitt was lying, and honestly, watching rich nobles embarrass themselves never gets old. Margarita quietly escapes the awkward conversation with a perfectly timed excuse, asking to be escorted elsewhere for a rare, limited edition wine. To the public, Margarita Gray is a very complicated figure. Some people see her as a nobody who got lucky enough to become Count Gray's third wife, while others admire her elegance so much that artists and intellectuals practically worship her. But behind that calm and graceful appearance, Rita is carrying something far darker. Because while everyone around her keeps smiling and socializing, Margarita is secretly memorizing faces. The people responsible for her mother's death are somewhere within high society, and even if Jeremy Gray was the one who orchestrated everything, Rita knows he couldn't have done it alone. Someone helped him, someone covered for him, someone stayed silent. And in Rita's mind, every single one of them deserves the exact same ending: death. Yeah, our girl has been carrying revenge in her heart for 10 straight years. Meanwhile, Isabel finally arrives at the Gray estate after spending the entire trip mentally preparing herself. Even now, there are words she desperately wants to say to Rita.
Mommy's here now.
But instead, she has to hide behind a completely different identity. The maid interview is handled by the head maid, Marcia, who immediately starts firing questions at Isabel one after another. Using the fake identity Bella Le, Isabel claims she's 26 years old with over 10 years of experience working as a servant. Marcia then starts testing her knowledge on household work, cleaning methods, serving etiquette, fireplace maintenance, and honestly, Isabel answers everything so perfectly that the interview barely lasts at all before she gets hired. Years of surviving as a maid are finally paying off. But before Isabel can even properly settle into her room, the atmosphere inside the mansion suddenly changes. Apparently, the madam returned home much earlier than expected, and the maids immediately start moving around in a panic while Isabel quietly listens in. According to the staff, Margarita rarely follows normal schedules anymore, and even the servants seem intimidated by her. Soon after, Isabel meets her new roommate Ellie, who immediately starts talking like they've known each other for years. Thankfully, the girl is friendly, and from Isabel's perspective, friendly maids are also perfect information sources. After all, the more people talk around her, the easier it'll be to understand what Rita's life has been like these past 10 years. Then suddenly, the announcement spreads throughout the mansion. The madam is coming. Every servant quickly lines up while Isabel takes her place among them, and then she hears it, the sound of heels slowly echoing across the marble floor. Sharp, elegant, confident. In that moment, reality finally hits Isabel harder than ever before. Rita isn't a child anymore. 10 entire years have passed, and the little girl she lost is now a grown woman walking toward her. Margarita Gray enters the room carrying the kind of presence that instantly silences everyone around her. Every servant lowers their head while she calmly scans the line of maids in front of her. Then suddenly she stops. Her eyes land directly on Isabel. For a brief second, neither of them says anything. Isabel keeps her expression calm, while desperately hiding the emotions threatening to spill out after 10 years apart. Then Margarita slowly steps closer until she's standing right in front of the new maid, and with a faint smile, she finally speaks.
Hello there, new maid.
The moment Margarita says those words, Isabel completely freezes, because standing in front of her now is no longer the little girl she remembers. Rita has grown up, and honestly, the realization hits Isabel way harder than she expected. The elegant makeup, the calm expression, the cold composure, even the dark powder hiding the exhaustion beneath Rita's eyes immediately stands out to her. For a second, Isabel can barely believe this is really her daughter. Trying to stay calm, Isabel introduces herself using the fake name Belle. But after studying her face for a while, a compliment slips out of her mouth, saying how beautiful Margarita's eyes are. Margarita quietly studies her for a moment, before giving a small compliment about her eyes as well, and telling her to work hard, and then she simply walks away. But even after Rita leaves, Isabel's thoughts stay locked on her, because in Isabel's eyes, Rita is still the most beautiful thing in that entire mansion. Not long after, Ellie immediately rushes over and tells Isabel how unbelievably lucky she just got. Apparently, every maid who tried flattering Margarita before ended up getting fired almost instantly, and according to Ellie, Rita has already replaced over 20 servants since becoming countess. So the fact Isabel survived that interaction without getting thrown out is apparently a miracle. Soon after, the girls properly introduce themselves. Ellie is 21 years old, while the youngest maid, Hannah, is only 11. When Hannah asks Belle's age, Isabel accidentally hesitates for a second before answering 26. She nearly revealed her real age without thinking. Then Isabel asks Hannah where her mother is, but Hannah quickly replies saying her mother works far away. Immediately, Isabel understands the truth. Hannah's mother is dead. Later that night, after Hannah falls asleep, Ellie finally explains everything. Apparently, Hannah's mother died in a carriage accident, and the worst part, Hannah was there when it happened. The trauma was so severe that her mind basically refuses to accept reality. Every single morning, she wakes up and asks when her mother is coming home again, even after being told the truth over and over. Honestly, that's just heartbreaking. Hearing this immediately makes Isabel think about Rita, and about what losing her mother must have done to her emotionally over the last 10 years. Then Isabel suddenly asks Ellie something much darker. What if someone murdered your mother instead? Would you still seek revenge, even if your mother wouldn't want that for you? Even if hatred completely consumed your life? Ellie thinks about it carefully before admitting she probably still would. But then she flips the question back onto Isabel. What if Belle were the mother instead, and her child was the one suffering? That question immediately drags painful memories back into Isabel's mind. The screaming, the accusations, being called a murderer, the execution. For a second, it almost overwhelms her completely, but Isabel forces herself back to reality before the memories consume her. Ellie quietly admits she doesn't know Isabel's past, but she feels like someone important to her might already be living for revenge alone. Even so, Ellie doesn't completely reject revenge either, because in her eyes, some people only keep living because revenge gives them a reason to continue. And honestly, those words hit Isabel hard, because after finally seeing Rita again, Isabel can't stop thinking about the exhaustion hidden beneath her daughter's eyes. The heavy makeup, the empty expression, the constant tension, it all makes Isabel wonder if revenge is the only thing keeping Rita alive anymore. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the capital, Ian and Cern finally arrive at the address connected to Eileen Nova. But when they get there, the place is completely empty with no sign of her anywhere, which leaves them with several possibilities. Maybe Eileen never arrived, maybe she got captured, or maybe she betrayed them. Even though Ian never says that last possibility out loud, it's clearly been weighing on him this entire time. Cern then points out another issue. They can't just stay in the capital forever without a proper reason. Eventually, they'll need to return to the Mirabelle Duchy and continue their responsibilities there. But after thinking for a moment, Cern suddenly remembers something important. One noble family connected to the crown prince recently invited him to visit, the Grey family. The second that name gets mentioned, Ian immediately agrees, because ever since becoming enemies with the crown prince, he already knew their paths would eventually cross again. But for Ian, this situation is also deeply personal, because Count Grey once took someone precious away from him. And even after all this time, Ian still hasn't forgotten that debt, or the promise he made because of it. One day, he intends to make Count Grey pay for Isabel. The next morning, Isabel wakes up feeling completely drained because all night, she kept dreaming about Rita. Not the elegant countess standing confidently inside the Grey mansion, but the child, the 10-year-old girl Isabel left behind. In the dream, Rita is still hiding inside the wardrobe exactly where Isabel told her to stay all those years ago, quiet, scared, and waiting for her mother to come back. And honestly, that realization completely destroys Isabel, because Rita probably spent days hiding like that after Isabel was taken away, listening for footsteps that never came and waiting for a promise that was never fulfilled. Inside the dream, Isabel desperately begs Rita to come out.
Please. I'm here. Now.
But before she can even fully recover, the mansion suddenly erupts with activity because, apparently, two important guests are visiting today, Sir Ian Lepellis and Sir Cern Victor. A formal dinner has already been arranged for the evening, meaning the servants are scrambling everywhere trying to prepare. Unfortunately for Isabel, her headache is getting worse too. Whether it's stress or the poison spreading through her body, she honestly can't tell anymore, but still, she forces herself to keep moving. Then suddenly, the head butler stops her and asks how much experience she has serving nobles directly. Isabel carefully answers that she's done it before, and apparently, that alone is enough. Before she even realizes what's happening, the butler assigns her to help host the guests personally. Yeah, our girl immediately gets thrown into the deep end. Not long after, Ellie rushes over and practically drags Isabel away to prepare her uniform while quickly explaining the situation. Apparently, the maid usually assigned to guest reception suddenly fell down the stairs yesterday, and according to Ellie, the girl hit her head so badly that she still hasn't properly regained consciousness. Even creepier, the only thing she clearly said afterward was that she saw a ghost. Honestly, the Grey estate somehow keeps getting more unsettling every chapter. Before Isabel can think too deeply about it, Ellie suddenly realizes the guests arrived earlier than expected and immediately starts panicking, which means Isabel barely has time to prepare before walking into the sitting room carrying tea for the visitors. The moment she enters, Isabel instantly recognizes both names, Ian Lepellis and Cern Victor. These aren't ordinary nobles. Years ago, while serving Countess Diana, Isabel learned about the political conflict surrounding the imperial succession. The Grey family supported the current crown prince. Meanwhile, the Lepellis and Victor families supported the third prince instead. But after the second prince died and the third prince became crippled shortly afterward, everyone assumed their faction was finished politically. Apparently, that's no longer true, because if Ian and Cern are openly visiting the Grey estate now, then the conflict between both sides is starting again. And honestly, that makes their presence here extremely dangerous, especially since the Grey estate should technically be enemy territory for them. While pouring the tea, Isabel quietly studies Ian from a distance, and for some reason, something about him feels strangely familiar. The green hair, the calm expression, the steady eyes, she's almost certain she's seen him somewhere before. Then suddenly, Ian looks directly at her. The eye contact only lasts for a second, but Isabel's entire body instantly tenses up on instinct. Thankfully, she manages to stay calm externally. Ian then casually comments that the tea is too hot and asks for a glass of water instead. The other servants immediately understand what he actually means. He's criticizing the tea without openly insulting the staff. Cern even points out that Ian could simply wait for the tea to cool down naturally, but Ian completely ignores him and repeats the request for just one glass of water. At this point, Isabel is internally panicking because something about Ian's behavior feels deliberate, like he's testing her somehow. Still, she forces herself to stay calm while preparing the water. Everything goes smoothly at first. She carries the glass over and sets it down perfectly with no mistakes. Then suddenly, Ian tilts the teacup, and before Isabel can even consciously think, her body reacts automatically. She catches the falling cup instantly before it can spill. The entire room freezes, including Isabel herself, because the second she realizes what she just did, her stomach drops. That reaction was way too fast, far too fast for an ordinary maid, and when Isabel slowly looks back up again, Ian is already staring directly at her, watching, analyzing, because the teacup was never an accident, he did it on purpose, and now Ian knows there's definitely something strange about the Gray family's new maid. The second Isabel catches the falling cup, she immediately realizes she made a huge mistake. Ian was testing her, and worst of all, she passed. Now the entire room is staring at her. Cern immediately looks impressed, pointing out that her reaction speed was way too fast for an ordinary maid. According to him, she practically saved Ian from getting covered in boiling tea. Then Cern casually says he wants to personally praise her to the Countess and asks for her name. At that moment, Isabel can literally hear her own heartbeat, but she forces herself to stay calm and gives the fake identity she prepared earlier, Bella Lay. The second Ian hears that name, something in his expression subtly changes. It is not enough for anyone else to notice, but Isabel notices immediately, because somehow, Ian recognizes the original owner of this body. Now Isabel's mind immediately starts racing. If Ian was allied with the woman whose body she inherited, then he'll start questioning why Eileen Nova is suddenly working as a maid inside the Gray estate. But if he's her enemy instead, then getting close to him could be even worse. Either way, Isabel is dangerously exposed right now, and the thing bothering her most. She still hasn't even had a real conversation with Rita yet. After everything she went through to get here, she still hasn't managed to truly reach her daughter. Still, Isabel quickly forces herself to calm down and rethink the situation logically. Ian only recognized something after hearing the fake name, which means he probably didn't know the original body owner well enough to identify her by appearance alone. That means he's working with incomplete information, and if that's true, then Isabel might still be able to fool him. Meanwhile, once Ian and Cern are finally alone, Cern immediately asks what that whole situation earlier was about, because even he could tell Ian was acting strangely. Ian instantly lowers his voice and reminds Cern that they're currently inside enemy territory, and then he asks if Cern remembers the maid's appearance, reddish hair and green eyes. At first, Cern doesn't understand why that matters, then suddenly it clicks, Eileen Nova. Ian points out that not everyone with those features is automatically Eileen, but honestly, Cern can already tell Ian strongly suspects it. Then Ian starts breaking down the fake identity Isabel used earlier, Bella Lay. Apparently, Alay is connected to Ian's own family through his mother's side, and according to him, spies often create fake identities using distant family names to make their covers more believable. But there's one major issue. That identity was designed for infiltrating noble society, not for working as a maid, which means something about this entire situation is seriously wrong. On top of that, Eileen never appeared at the rendezvous point after entering the capital, so now Ian starts considering multiple possibilities. Maybe this woman is actually Eileen Nova, maybe someone killed the real Eileen and stole her identity, or maybe something else happened entirely. For now, Ian decides they'll continue observing her during tonight's banquet, and depending on how things go, this situation could turn violent very quickly. Even Cern starts asking if they should prepare for bloodshed, but surprisingly, Ian quietly admits he hopes it doesn't come to that. Meanwhile, the formal banquet finally begins later that evening. Nobles from across the capital start arriving one after another while Count Grey proudly plays the role of generous host. At the same time, Isabel carefully prepares herself backstage with heavy makeup, a fake background story, and perfectly rehearsed lies. She even coordinated details beforehand with Ellie just in case anyone starts questioning her identity. According to her cover story, Bella Lay has lived in the capital her entire life and has never even traveled south before. Basically, Isabel is preparing for an interrogation at this point. Soon after, Ian and Cern officially arrive at the banquet as guests. Immediately, one noble at the table starts giving a long-winded speech, welcoming everyone while acting way too pleased with himself. And honestly, Isabel already looks exhausted just listening to him. As the dinner continues, one noble at the table suddenly starts ranting about poor people ruining the streets and says they should all be rounded up into camps. Yeah, these nobles somehow get worse every chapter. Ian quietly tells the man to lower his voice, but the Baron completely misunderstands the reaction and assumes Ian agrees with him. Thankfully, the conversation eventually shifts toward a toast instead, and honestly, Isabel is relieved, because as long as the nobles are busy talking among themselves, nobody's paying attention to her. At least, that's what she thinks. Toast begins, everyone raises their glasses, and then suddenly, Ian spills wine directly onto one of the guests. It's not a small spill either. The drink hits with enough force to completely shock the entire table, and with the calmest expression imaginable, Ian simply says he seems to have made a mistake. Across the room, Ian immediately turns toward Isabel, and for the first time his expression almost looks amused. Almost. Then he quietly asks her one simple question.
You'll help me again this time, too, right, Maid?
Ian immediately steps in and says it's fine. According to him, he'll personally call for the Baron's attendant, but then he casually adds one more thing. The maid should take care of the Baron herself. Instantly, Isabel realizes what's happening. He did that on purpose. Ian is deliberately isolating her. Still, Isabel has no choice except to follow orders. She escorts the furious Baron away, while the man loudly complains about his eyes the entire time. After finally dropping him off in another room, Isabel returns to the banquet hall, only to find Ian already waiting for her again. This time he calmly claims he drank too much wine and asks her to bring him some water. At this point, Isabel is internally screaming because she knows this isn't about water. He's testing her again. Trying her best to stay calm, Isabel pours the drink carefully and brings it over, but this time her nervousness is impossible to hide. Even her hands are shaking visibly. Ian notices immediately, and instead of attacking or accusing her, he simply tells her to calm down, which somehow makes the situation even worse. Then he quietly points out something else. She doesn't seem like someone used to serving high-ranking nobles. Still trying to protect her cover, Isabel quickly explains that while she's worked as a maid for years, serving important guests directly is completely new to her. Thankfully, Ellie suddenly appears and backs up the story without hesitation. According to Ellie, Belle has always worked ordinary maid jobs and simply isn't experienced with noble banquets yet. And surprisingly, Ian accepts the explanation, at least outwardly. He even casually thanks Isabel for the water afterward like nothing strange happened. But the second she looks down at her hand, she realizes it's completely soaked in sweat. Yeah, our girl is barely surviving this interrogation. Then Rita finally appears again, dressed in red, elegant, composed, and completely untouchable. The second she enters the room, all attention naturally shifts toward her. Isabel can barely stop herself from staring. Rita calmly announces that special wine gifted by the Crown Prince has been prepared in the game room for the guests. Immediately, whispers spread through the nobles, because this basically confirms the Grey family is still closely connected to the Crown Prince politically. But before Rita can leave, Ian suddenly speaks up, and the atmosphere changes instantly. He casually mentions that he also brought something special tonight, a rare wine of his own. Now the entire room starts getting excited because, apparently, Ian's wine might be even rarer than the Crown Prince's. The nobles immediately start acting like they're witnessing some legendary alcohol showdown. Ian then tells everyone to enjoy themselves first while he retrieves it, and then he turns toward Isabel, calmly declaring that she'll accompany him as his personal maid. The moment they leave together, Isabel's anxiety immediately spikes again because now they're completely alone. The deeper they walk into the mansion, the quieter everything becomes, and without realizing it, Isabel slowly moves one hand closer toward the hidden knife she's carrying, just in case. At this point, she still doesn't know whether Ian is an ally or an enemy, and being trapped alone with a powerful noble inside an enclosed space feels extremely dangerous. Then suddenly, Ian stops walking and asks if she's so distracted that she didn't notice she walked past him. Isabel instantly turns around and immediately realizes something terrifying. Ian is now standing between her and the exit. The room only has one way out, and he's blocking it. For a brief second, panic completely takes over her body, and then suddenly, a memory that doesn't belong to Isabel flashes through her mind as a voice echoes inside her head.
Raise your arm and pull with all your strength.
There's a flash of light, a door, fear, then everything disappears just as quickly as it came. Meanwhile, Ian simply opens the wine cellar door normally, and that's when Isabel finally realizes something important. She isn't actually afraid of Ian himself. She's afraid of being trapped alone with a man inside an enclosed room, which means whatever trauma this body carries, it came from the original owner, not from Isabel. Ian then notices how badly she's sweating and quietly asks if she's afraid of enclosed spaces. Before Isabel can answer, he hands her a handkerchief. And honestly, this man somehow keeps switching between terrifying and weirdly considerate every 5 minutes. After calming down slightly, Isabel thanks him. Ian then tells her to stop speaking formally and simply call him Sir Ian. Once she does, his expression immediately sharpens again, and then finally, he asks the real question directly. He says he's now certain she's Aileen Nova, or at least, he wants to know if he's wrong. At this point, Isabel quickly realizes denying everything completely won't work anymore. Ian already knows the Belle Alay identity was real. He knows it was connected to Aileen Nova somehow, and more importantly, if Ian were truly her enemy, he probably would have exposed or killed Isabel already. So instead, Isabel tells him a partial truth. She admits she lost her memories after waking up, and because of that, she honestly doesn't even know whether she truly is Aileen Nova or not. Ian quietly studies her for a moment after hearing that. Then he simply says, "I see." And before Isabel can even react, Ian suddenly moves. Fast. A blade flashes toward her neck, and the chapter ends right there on an absolutely brutal cliffhanger.